Mochi, no. Mochi, stop. So right now the tensions are really high. I'm one of those people who is really stressed out about the state of the world. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of tension. I thought, you know what might make everyone feel a little bit better is a video essay about cannibalism. So today I want to talk about my favorite book. I think this might be my favorite book. I think I've made that decision. This is my fifth, I think, reread. I reread it on the plane when I was going on my trip, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And I do have other videos I'm supposed to do before this. I have a philosophy iceberg video to edit, and I literally had to get this out first because I can't stop thinking about it, and I needed to get it out so that I could stop thinking about it. And instead you can think about it and you can obsess over it. You don't have to have read this book or have read a book to understand my analysis. This is like an extremely interesting horror concept in itself. I'm gonna explain what the plot is, and there are going to be spoilers, but not in a gigantic way where you can't read the book and enjoy it, because most of the enjoyment of this book is the splatterpunk-ness of it, which Splatterpunk is just an extremely disturbing, gory novel. And if you like that, you will like this book. If you've never read Splatterpunk, I probably wouldn't start with this one because it is very, very intense. If you do have an interest in this novel to read it, I'm going to tell you when to stop watching the video because there is a twist at the end that I need to talk about, and that is the biggest spoiler. So I will tell you when to stop watching, and for the rest of you, you can just... So Tender is the Flesh is a dystopian horror novel about cannibalism and about disease. So it's written by Agustina B. I'm gonna put her name up here because I don't know how to pronounce it. And before I get into this novel, I want to read what her words say about why she wrote this. One day I was walking by a butcher's shop and all I saw were bodies of animals hanging down, and I thought, why can't those be human corpses? After all, we are all animals, we are flesh. And that's how the idea for this novel emerged. This book is translated into English from, I believe, Spanish. This book is an Argentinian novel. So this is notoriously a famous novel, and it has a lot of bad reviews. If you search up this novel on YouTube, there are a lot of awful reviews. People saying it's a terrible book, people saying it's really obvious. I'm gonna get into that in my analysis, but it's kind of like, I need to tell you the cultural... Maybe it's part of my obsession with the brutality of the universe and the human psyche. Maybe it's that I like to be scared. I don't know what it is about this novel. I think it's a masterpiece, and I feel like I need to defend it because when I tried to go look for other people that agreed with me, I couldn't really find that many. And the ones that I did find were like articles that didn't have any comments. I wanted people to talk about it. I want people to say how much they like it. It mixes all my favorite elements: horror, allegory, like cultural critique, and also women writing splatterpunk / horror. I love it when women write fucked up stuff. I just think they do such a good job. When women write it, it just seems like less exploitative, and that's a really terrible blanket statement to put on top of every author and every director and writer, but I just do like it better when women are writing the splatterpunk book. I don't know. So in this dystopian horror novel, humans cannot eat animals anymore. Animals have all contracted a virus that if humans come in contact with it, they immediately die. They have to stop eating meat. They have to shut down all of the zoos. There's really disturbing imagery of everyone's pets being killed at once because it happened all at once, and everyone had to kill every animal they could see or avoid animals at all costs. And that also includes birds. Like people go around wearing umbrellas because they don't want birds to get their fluids on them because the people will die. So think about if every slaughterhouse had to be shut down, every zoo. We depend on animals for so many things, like animal testing, meat, like dairy, eggs, a lot of stuff is animals, unfortunately. Agustina presents propaganda, cruelty, gore, and really interesting social dynamics and really interesting conversations. And it's all through our protagonist, main character, Marcos. He works at a human slaughterhouse, and he's great at it. He's fantastic at it. He has a wife who he's pretty much estranged from because of the death of their young son, which is kind of kept pretty mysterious. He has a father with dementia, and he has a sister who has fully embraced this cannibalistic lifestyle. So in Marcos's universe, he's been living with this cannibalism normalization for basically his entire life. He has memories of before it was like this, but the transition was so all-encompassing that that's his new universe, is a universe where he works at a human slaughterhouse. This is reality, and there's no part of him that can really do anything about that. It's become such an inherent part of humanity that we eat other humans. His father couldn't deal with the transition, and it's pretty much insinuated that his dementia was caused by the trauma of this transition where everyone started eating people, and it happened to a lot of older people. They physically couldn't handle it, but people like Marcos's sister are fully on board. If it means they can survive, they will be eating humans. And our story basically begins when someone drops off a first-generation pure livestock human at Marcos's front door because he's so good at his job and he has a lot of connections, and it's just a gift. It's like someone dropping off a pig at your front door for you to slaughter, and it's like a really nice organic pig. A first-generation pure human is a human that is not treated with kind of like human pesticides and it's born and raised in a slaughterhouse and never been tainted with like outside human DNA, if that makes sense. Like a lot of people get killed and eaten and they're low grade, low quality meat. I will get into that, and it's such an interesting universe, so don't worry, but he does get one of these dropped off at his house. Before I get into this story, because this is where the story begins, this is where the meat of the novel is Marcos's journey with this FGP female and all the things that happen after she gets dropped off at his doorstep. I want to first talk about some of the logical concerns you might have with this novel and the common critiques that a lot of people have about why it's not a good novel, because I strongly feel that it is, and I have this idea about it that I'm going to slowly explain to you. First, a lot of people say, why is the disease not transmissible between humans, and why is it only when an animal comes in contact with a human the human dies? I think firstly this is because the novel is a metaphor. It's the same way with the substance when people were raising a lot of logical concerns about how it works, how the consciousness gets transferred, how much of the consciousness gets transferred between the two women, but it's not supposed to be looked at in that way. The novel is a metaphor. It's not supposed to be picked apart logistically. That's not really how novels work, I fear. You shouldn't really take this at literal face value. Although there's a lot of literal face value things that happen, you shouldn't take the concept as like trying to prove it wouldn't happen, because that's not what it's about. It's a grotesque novel about cannibalism and ritual human cannibalism. It's not supposed to be logical. But my theory is this is such an obvious plot hole that it points to something hidden in plain sight. I think this author is trying to make very clear the difference between humans and animals. Like Tender as the Flesh makes this distinction by leaving this glaring plot hole, or like plot hole. It's just like a part of the story that doesn't make logical sense. I feel like this is totally on purpose, because it would be easy to write around this plot hole or explain it in the novel. It would also make for like a more entertaining and chaotic universe, which is more interesting in a novel, so why wouldn't she write an explanation? The answer to that, I think, is spotlights animals versus humans. That is a theme, and that is not to be messed with. And the difference is humans have self-awareness and self-control, consciousness. Whatever you like to call what allows us to have mental illness is what she's trying to get at by leaving this plot hole. I think she's trying to make sure that we're thinking about this when we're reading this novel, and it makes it more horrifying, but it also is the point of the novel. The second critique is, why doesn't everyone just eat soy protein? Again, this is assigning too much realism onto a fictional story, but also most people love meat. It's literally destroying our environment, like objectively speaking, and people still make random excuses to eat it always. It's the biggest polluter of the environment and no one gives a fuck. because people love meat. It's just something that people love. There's no way that everybody would just become vegan. I genuinely believe that this cannibalism situation is more likely than everyone just being vegan, because vegan meat has come so far, people still won't touch it. They think it's disgusting. It's crazy. I'm not a vegan myself, and I'm fully aware of the cognitive dissonance I have with caring about the planet and also eating meat. When I go get sushi, I know that it's destroying the environment. It is destroying the oceans. Do I still eat it? Yes. Because that's how humans are. Humans are not good. So that's not the point of the book. That's different. The third critique is going to be harder to explain if you haven't read it or you don't know about this book. People are saying it's too obvious. They're saying it's a too obvious critique of the patriarchy, animal rights, capitalism, and others. My answer to that is I don't think that's the main point of the book. The fact that every single time a woman writes something, it's considered a feminist manifesto and not like a work of art or critique is crazy to me. I see that happen constantly, where if a woman writes anything or directs anything, it's automatically super feminist. And while it inherently probably is, there is other things that we can talk about. Like we see other things in society that are interesting. Like, just because this novel has the theme of gender in it does not mean it's a feminist novel. It just is reductive. And of course it's too obvious to you if you're seeing it as a feminist novel. Like, obviously, if you're seeing it in only that way, it's going to be too obvious. I think this metaphor is so much richer and so much deeper than that. And I think it does touch on all these topics. Capitalism, the patriarchy, animal rights, but it is more than that. There's a reason it touches on every single one of those. It's because it's a deeper issue and it's rooted way deeper. And people that can't see that, like, I just think that people see this as written by a woman and think it's a feminist manifesto, and it's driving me fucking insane. Another critique is it's gory without substance. And I'm not a big fan of this critique in general, as I'm a horror fan and I've read a lot of splatterpunk books, and I think some of them are gory without substance, but I think this is a lazy critique. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the Terrifier movies, but there are people out there that know the Terrifier lore and derive meaning from it, and the person who's made them obviously has a vision for it. Obviously, it's more than just gore without substance. Extreme gore is not the defining point of any media that it's in. And to think that it is just like, it's giving puritanical. Like, just get over it. If you're not into the gore part of this novel, don't read a splatterpunk book. I'm sorry. So let's stop yelling, and I'm going to get into my analysis of this book and what I think it's about and why I think it's really good. My theory is that Tender is the Flesh is not a political or cultural novel, but it's a philosophical one. I don't think it's a metaphor for capitalism, and I don't think it's a metaphor for the patriarchy, and I don't think it's a metaphor for the way we treat animals. Although that's part of it, like the barbaric way we treat other creatures, I think that is just a theme. I think Tender is the Flesh asks a really crazy question, and that question is there a fate worse than death? And then it answers it, and it says yes. Tender is the Flesh demonstrates a fate worse than death. This is an insanely powerful philosophical statement to make with your novel. And I might be wrong, but I'm going to talk about why I think that is. By demonstrating a universe with fates worse than death, it insinuates that this universe is against the natural order of humans, because death is part of our natural order. And to make something worse than the worst thing that happens to us is making it so we're not living in our natural order. And I think by saying that, Tender is the Flesh says that empathy is part of our natural order as humans. It's an incredibly empathetic novel. It says that we as humans have a responsibility to follow our empathy instinct the same way that animals have the instinct to immediately get up and hunt and run and breed. A society full of cannibals is not one worth having. It's worse than no humans at all. That's not the way that nature is supposed to be. And I think this is such an obvious book that's telling us why we need empathy as part of our natural order. Like, being bred in a human factory farm is definitely worse than death. Death makes sense to us. It's inevitable. But to torture someone to the point where they are dehumanized in a factory farm to be eaten by other humans, that is worse than anything I can ever think of. And that's why this book is so incredibly haunting and why I just obsess over it, because I'm like, this is the craziest shit ever. Like, this novel is so dark and so depraved. It literally is the most empathetic novel in that way. Like, it is empathetic because it knows how to get to you. The Tender is the Flesh universe spits in the face of God or whatever you want to call a higher power or whatever you want to call something that's beyond humans. It literally spits in the face of the natural order of humans. So nature, or the will of God in this universe, created a virus that only kills humans when they come in contact with it. Is that not the universe saying that we don't want humans anymore? Like, in the Tender is the Flesh universe, humans were supposed to die off. I think that is the whole message of the book. Animals don't have the capacity to survive in the face of what nature wants them to do. If nature wants an animal to die, it will die. Humans are too stubborn. And instead of listening to this virus that was supposed to wipe the humans out, they went against every single instinct and became a society of sociopathic, starving cannibals, human hunters, and children eaters. Like, society in this novel is like sticking like gum to a wall trying to survive in the face of what nature obviously didn't want them to do. But their survival becomes their own hell. And what is the point of living in a world like that? So what is the natural order? What does that mean? It's defined as the orderly system comprising the physical universe and functioning according to natural as distinguished from human or supernatural laws. So there's a lot of debate on what humans' natural order is. Like, that's like a whole philosophical thing about what we are supposed to be like. But I think this book says that it's supposed to be empathetic. And I think to separate humans from nature is just not gonna happen ever. Like, we're a part of nature as much as we don't like to think that. We exist in nature, we're a part of it. So my main point is a huge reach, and maybe the author has no fucking clue what I'm on about, but I think the point of this novel is to say that empathy is part of our natural order as humans, and it's our responsibility to uphold for the survival of our species in a way that is worth it to survive in. And this novel is what happens when we go against nature on a massive scale. Not only did the humans in this novel go against nature by surviving in the face of a disease that was supposed to take us out, they also are surviving by going against every single instinct they have, which is to not eat other humans, not breed them to be eaten, not eat babies. That's so crazy. This is objectively worse than if everybody were dead. And I'm saying that again because death is natural. This is really not. So I'm going to give you some details on why specifically this universe is better off not existing. And the author kind of mimics this sentiment because Margos's sister's children, which are young children, the way that she writes them is that they're psychopaths and they are literally devoid of empathy and they're little shits, basically. And it just mimics it that even the children in this universe are literally not humans. The people in this universe are so messed up that they're no longer reminiscent of any kind of functional society that they had before. So this novel has some really disturbing scenes, but the scenes that make me think that this universe sucks the most is a few from like the middle towards the end of the book, and trigger warning for really messed up concepts. There's a Dr. 𝑣𝐻 in this universe who literally does experiments on people. It's a nightmare hospital where she is basically doing Unit 731 experiments on people. Actually, like, all of the experiments described in the book that Margot sees and hears about are basically exactly from that situation. There's a gamekeeper who is a Romanian dude who literally hunts celebrities and mounts their heads on his wall because the celebrities had a huge debt, and he said, if you can survive, I don't know if it's like a few hours or 24 hours or something, in my situation where I'm going to be hunting you with a rifle, then your debt gets paid off. And a lot of these celebrities don't survive and they get their heads put on a wall. This dude literally just lives in his castle with these people's heads on his wall. He has these like unusually long fingernails and he's doing all this messed up stuff like hunting the celebrities and then eating them. It's really messed up. He also does this thing where he will do other things with people that he pays for certain services and then he will eat them. And it's like this guy is just depraved on every single way you can be depraved. And that's like only for the ultra wealthy, is to do the hunting and do the experiments. The more middle working class day-to-day situations where they're seeing cannibalism is, first of all, Marcos works at a slaughterhouse where there's a lot of like really messed up visual descriptions of people getting taken out in the slaughterhouse. Like, I don't know how to explain to you how horrifying this universe is. There are people with no limbs in these slaughterhouses they're basically birthing machines for the slaughterhouse to have more first generation pure heads, which heads are what people call humans that are made for food. So you wouldn't be called a human, you'd be called a head. And there are pure heads and there are lower quality heads that are like lower quality meats. There's also a group of scavengers around the slaughterhouse at all times that are waiting for people to come in and out so they can steal heads and eat them because they're starving to death. A lot of people are starving to death in this universe. There is not enough heads to go around, and people are obviously losing their minds. People are losing their minds. This is not a productive society. There's a lot of churches where people will do sacrifices to be eaten by the church. There's also this butcher that our main character has a relationship with who owns a shop that used to just do regular meats and now she does human meats. And she just like totally without empathy is cutting up hundreds of heads, putting their meat in her butcher shop, just ruthlessly. And I mean so ruthlessly, it is so hard to read. It's the most effective horror I've ever read in a book. It really gets to me, especially when they do these descriptions of like the like ice box that she keeps the meats in and the packaged hands, and it's just too much. It's literally too much. Like, if you watched Fresh and thought that was intense, I don't even know how to describe to you how intense this one is. And most disturbingly of all, there is a scene where somebody barbecues a baby and makes a barbecue sandwich. There's this very visceral scene of them holding the sandwich and barbecue sauce just dripping onto his white shoe, and it's so incredibly disgusting. It's so vile. I actually watched a YouTube review and some dude was reviewing this novel, and I fully respect everyone's opinions, like I'm not trying to hate, but he said that this was like comical. It was like a black comedy because it was so intensely disturbing. But I've seen and read a lot of black comedies and really disturbing stuff, and the way it's written does not read to me as a black comedy. It reads to me as like trying to describe what it's like to have no empathy and how wrong that is in our natural order as humans. Like, I was thinking, if that's his opinion, like, and he's laughing about these scenes, like, it seems like he's maybe just uncomfortable and he doesn't want to admit that he's scared and uncomfortable by a novel. That's what it felt like to me, because I've seen many a black comedy, I've read many a splatterpunk book, and I'm genuinely unsettled and disturbed by her novel. I do think it's scary. I don't think it's funny, like, at all. And I like to see the humor and stuff. I'm quite a giggler and a laugher. I do not think it's funny. I thought it was really fucked. So those are the reasons why this universe is the worst and why it is worse than being dead. You would rather be dead than be in this universe. I don't know how many times I have to reiterate that. If you do something wrong enough, you can go to the municipal slaughterhouse where you get eaten because you did a crime. And you can see how that's a slippery slope. Like, if the cannibalism isn't a slippery slope enough, low-income people are getting eaten in way higher numbers because you get put in for a crime and you didn't do it. Who gives a fuck? We need more food. So throughout this like depraved story, the main character's vibe is that he is disapproving of it. And you see it through his eyes in a way that is like disapproving and very angry at the state of the world. And he seems like an empathetic person and you feel for him. But it's not ever stated that he does feel this way. You just, the way that she wrote it is like, you don't know how he feels, but you feel like he wants to do something if he could. He hates his sister for the way that she's fully accepted it. He judges people in his head. And when he gets this FGP female, he doesn't kill her right away. He doesn't kill her at all. He names her Jasmine and basically takes care of her. It's a really messed up kind of thing where he has to supervise her and keep her in his house supervised so that she doesn't mess anything up, and teach her how to wear clothes. It is so messed up. Throughout this novel, you slowly start to think, how are they going to get away? How is he going to get away with Jasmine? And if you would like to read this book and you don't want to know the twist, do not watch the rest of this video. I'm going to talk about the ending, and I'm going to talk about my final thoughts. The last few paragraphs of this novel is something that keeps me up at night, and it's the most masterful twist genuinely I've ever read in a novel like this. You're on this journey with Marcos, and you're thinking, how is he going to run away with this woman? How is he going to escape this society? And what is he going to do with his unborn child because he impregnated her? And that is messed up in its own way because she can't speak. She has probably like the mental capacity of probably someone who's 10 years old and nonverbal. She doesn't understand a lot of things, and you do feel like he has a general sense of empathy, like more empathy than most of the people in this novel, who by comparison are so much worse, even though he's obviously evil just the way he is. You have hope for him. It's the reason this novel buries itself so deeply in your skin is because you feel like you were robbed. And you feel like you were robbed because of what Marcos does at the very end of this novel. Just when you think, when is he going to escape? And you're fully convinced he will escape and he will find a way out. His wife comes over and their relationship has been estranged ever since the death of their son. Marcos literally unalives this FGP female who you have learned to have empathy for. You think that he loves, and he takes her child and raises it with his wife to replace their dead child. And you just spent all of this time learning about Marcos, having empathy for him, thinking that he is trying to stop what's going on, and then he does this. It's like the antithesis of what it's like to converse with a rational and empathetic human being is what this novel is. You don't feel like you've gained anything. You feel like you've dumped all of what you were projecting the goodness on into a black hole. Like you were projecting all this goodness onto Marcos, and it's just ending up nowhere. It ends up gone. It's so incredible that a novel can do that, let alone do that to me 5 times. Every single time I reread it, it did it to me again, and I was like, there's no way he's going to do that. We assign our own empathy to the main character. We find glimmers of hope and dog whistles that he's a good person in his language and thoughts, and we see him as having morals because we can't navigate this universe without that. Like, his mood is just mostly judgmental and moody and mostly psychopathic, but we still have that hope and we still feel for him. We assign this like he has no choice, he's a good person deep down kind of thing to him because that's what we want him to be. Not only does this author prove that most humans have deep empathy as they project it onto Marcos, who has none and who has never said that he had any, is proving that not only is empathy so deeply ingrained in us, in our psyches, and in our natural order, but she's showing you what happens when you have none. It's chaos, it's mass depravity, and it doesn't work. Marcos is not happy. He doesn't get a replacement son. He has nothing, essentially. And his last thing he says about Jasmine, this FGP who you've learned to care for, after he has unalived her, after she has given birth, he says, she had the human look of a domesticated animal. That is insane. And I know you can't understand how crazy that is until you've read it, but it's the biggest betrayal. So my theory is that Tender is the Flesh has a message that it's in its title. Tender is our flesh. We are inherently tender. We inherently have empathy, and empathy is part of our natural order, and she shows you what happens when we have none. It's the most depraved horror book. It's the most nightmare situation with no good parts. You don't really come in contact with a good human, like you kind of with his father who has dementia, who hasn't done anything really wrong in the book, but still, he's not all the way there. We should have known the minute that Marcos accepted the gift that he was a bad person deep down, but we still just refuse to believe it. We don't fully understand that this was all for his own selfish needs and his own desires that he actually keeps her around. We just assume it's out of the goodness of his heart. And I think 99% of readers felt that way. So that is my review and analysis of Tender is the Flesh and what it says about us as a society. What it says about the importance of loving each other and respecting each other in a deep, deep, deep way. How fundamental that is to our survival as a species and how it upholds our culture. You see a lot like the degradation of empathy, especially in right now we're like living in a time where people's rights are being taken away, and it's like when we don't lead with empathy, we go against our natural order. And I think that's what this book is trying to say. And that's what I love about horror and extreme horror books, is that they do things that other media just can't do. There's no other kind of format that could describe what this describes. And it's weird because I feel such a hope for humanity and the arts when I read things like this and it has such a powerful message versus when I see something really shallow that might be more of like a feel-good novel, a feel-good movie. I feel more understood and I feel more at home in the world when I know there are people that have really similar values in a way that they're showing me what the exact opposite of their values are. For example, again, I don't think the Terrifier movies are made so that people can see how depraved humans can be. I think it's a catharsis and it's an outlet for personifying evil in a way that we can have comfort in knowing there is a truly evil character and not have to just live with it that evil is usually hidden in plain sight and we don't really know where it is at all times. You have no idea when you're talking to someone who's done horrible things. You have no fucking idea. And I think I'm not the one who said this first, and I really can't remember who did, but the Terrifier movies do that for people. Like, they give people an outlet for that. And it's comforting to all be in agreement that something's bad. And I think that's why the horror community is so welcoming and is so empathetic. I think it's so much more than just splatterpunk, and I think that this book is very scary and it's very good. So Tender is the Flesh is disgusting, it's depraved, and I hope you enjoyed my analysis. Genuinely, I needed to get this out. It's been something I've been thinking about for so long, and I promise my philosophy iceberg video is going to be out this week. Like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever, it will be out this week, early this week. And I do not think that I could live in this universe in the first place, because I hope you have a great night and thanks for watching.